Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes legendary source material, really gets under the hood, and figures out exactly how the classics got built.
That's the plan.
And today, we are definitely cracking the whip on one of the all-time greats. We're looking at the surprising beginnings of Indiana Jones and the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission really is to trace how this icon came to be. We're going back to George Lucas's first ideas, then through those pretty chaotic but totally crucial story conferences.
Okay.
And we'll see how a pile of early drafts turned this character who was, well, kind of a suave, untouchable playboy into the vulnerable professor we actually know and, root for.
Okay, let's definitely unpack that because the Indy we got in the end, the academic who hates snakes but, risks everything for history.
Yeah.
He's so different from where it all started.
Completely different.
The notes, they say Lucas was just totally burned out on sci-fi after American Graffiti.
Yeah.
He wanted something else, a throwback. So he looked back to those old 1930s and 40s serials.
Yeah.
Things like Zorro's Fighting Legion and Spy Smasher.
And that focus on serials, that's really the key insight here, isn't it? Serials, for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know, were these short films shown weekly before the main movie.
Right, chapter plays.
Exactly. Famous for just outrageous action and, maybe most importantly, those cliffhanger endings. You always had to come back next week.
Yeah. And unlike James Bond, who, always had the perfect gadget ready, the heroes in those serials, they often failed, didn't they? They'd end up tied to the train tracks or, falling off a cliff.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating is how Indiana Jones, his creation, it was almost a reaction against how untouchable modern spy movies had become.
Yep.
Lucas wanted a modern guy, sure, globe-trotting hunting treasures. He drew inspiration from real people like Roy Chapman Andrews, the explorer.
Right.
And fictional tough guys like Doc Savage. But the sources show this concept really set the stage for that grueling 9-day brainstorming session later on. That's where Indy's defining traits really got hammered out.
So let's rewind way back, 1973. That's when the idea first pops up. But then it gets immediately put on a shelf for, that other little Sphinx movie Lucas was working on.
Star Wars, yeah.
And this original adventurer, he wasn't even Jones yet. He was called Indiana Smith.
Indiana Smith. It almost sounds, comically plain, right?
Yeah.
Which is funny because the character Lucas first imagined was anything but plain.
Oh, so?
This early version, he was pure Bond archetype. Suave, womanizing playboy type. Also a kung fu expert, apparently.
Kung fu?
Yeah. And he funded his pretty luxurious lifestyle, nightclubs and all that with the artifacts he recovered. So he was quite literally a grave robber operating in a moral gray area.
Hold on. If the whole point was to get back to that simple, pulpy, serial heroism where the hero wins through, pluck and daring, wouldn't a moral gray area grave robber just completely undermine that? How did they reconcile that?
Well, that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? That first character sketch was just too cynical, too self-serving. He was all about profit, not preservation. And yeah, he definitely needed a name change too, even though the fun fact is Indiana actually came from Lucas's dog.
His dog.
Yeah, a big Jack Russell Terrier, apparently.
Huh. Humble start for such an epic name. But the Smith part, that had to go.
Oh, absolutely. Steven Spielberg later said Smith sounded less like an adventurer and more like some kind of Vegas lounge singer.
Huh, okay, I can see that.
So they changed it to Jones. Just a simple sound change, but it immediately shifts him away from that spy thriller feel towards, a real adventure hero.
It really sounds like if they'd made the movie back in 73, we'd have gotten something, a big grubbier, like a spy thriller with some archaeology bits, not the big pulp adventure we got.
Exactly. The major pivot point, the big change, comes in 1975. That's when Lucas teams up with director Philip Kaufman.
Right, Kaufman.
And this collaboration with Kaufman, it was absolutely crucial because he killed the James Bond vibe. The sources are clear. As soon as Kaufman came on board, he just nixed the heavy spy stuff.
So no more chain-smoking playboy.
Gone. Specifically removed that characterization. He started pushing Indy towards being more of a hero who's after knowledge, not just a rogue agent looking for cash.
And this is also where the actual plot gets that huge high-stakes upgrade, right? This early work revealed Kaufman brought in the MacGuffin, the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes. And the story behind that is just brilliant. Apparently, Kaufman got the idea from his dentist.
His dentist, seriously?
Yeah, who had all these wild Bible theories, is how the source puts it. So suddenly, Indy's quest isn't just about finding gold or some generic artifact for himself.
Right.
It becomes a race against the ultimate villains, the Nazis, for this biblical superweapon.
Okay, forgetting the random dentist story for a second. Using the Ark, that immediately makes the MacGuffin something genuinely mythological. Way beyond a simple treasure. Spy movies rarely did that.
Exactly. It instantly raises the stakes, gives the whole thing real, like, spiritual weight, heart.
Which meant they had to change the character too, presumably.
Precisely. That move meant toning down the womanizing, the grave robbing, dialing it way back to make the hero relatable, not, repellent.
You have to believe he actually cares about preserving the Ark, not just selling it off.
Right. You need to root for him.
And then Star Wars hits. Big time in '77. Spielberg sees it, loves it, wants to do something fun like those old serials, and he signs on to direct.
Yep. Which brings in the third key player, Lawrence Kasdan. He gets hired to actually write the script.
Right. And that leads us straight into the infamous Story Conference, January 1978. If you want to pinpoint where the magic really happened.
This is it. It's in this ordinary rental house in Sherman Oaks. The three of them, Lucas, Spielberg, Kasdan, lock themselves away for 9 grueling days. 9 hours a day, just brainstorming.
9 hours a day. Before a single page of script was even written, so they weren't writing dialogue yet. They were just designing the big moments, the spectacle.
They were basically building the action scaffolding first. The sources confirm that these huge sequences we think of as pure Indy, that classic rolling boulder trap.
Iconic.
This fight around the flying wing plane. All of those were born in that intense, high-pressure brainstorming session. They essentially designed the movie backwards, starting with the biggest stunts.
But maybe the most important thing to come out of that session wasn't an action scene at all. It was creating Indy's defining flaw.
Yes.
Spielberg apparently pushed really hard for vulnerability. He insisted Indy had to be afraid of something ridiculous.
And this is the moment, isn't it, where the character gets real complexity. They kicked around some early ideas like fear of heights or fire.
Which feel a bit standard. Too easy for an action hero.
Yeah, exactly. Then they landed on ophidiophobia, the fear of snakes. And they chose it specifically for that delicious, ironic twist.
The irony being...
What's the one tool Indy always carries? His coiled bullwhip, which looks just like...
a snake. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It perfectly sets up that absolute nightmare in the Well of Souls later, where the very thing he uses for defense is useless against his deepest fear.
And that vulnerability kind of cemented the look, too, didn't it? The fedora and whip, they started as just nods to the serials from Lucas. But here, they became locked in as visual signatures, and they were designed specifically as tools for clever escapes, right? Swinging across a gap, grabbing something.
Yeah, less about brute force, more about agility and thinking on your feet, just like those old serial heroes. Wit over weapons sometimes.
Okay, so those 9 intense days defined the character, the big set pieces. The pressure then shifts to Kasdan to actually get all that chaotic brilliance down on paper.
Right, which leads into his part of the process. He delivers that first draft 5 months later, August 1978, and it was huge. Globetrotting U.S., Nepal, Egypt, Greece.
Wow.
A big 110-page script. Indy's there as this wisecracking anti-hero.
But 110 pages. That's still pretty long. It needed more work before they could actually, head out to the desert and shoot it. What were the big cuts?
Yeah.
Major changes that got it down to the final, tighter 98-page script?
Well, the key was really about efficiency. Streamlining things, getting rid of the character's sort of messy edges. They cut a whole Shanghai side trip.
Shanghai?
Yeah, a sequence that, funnily enough, they ended up recycling later for Temple of Doom.
Ah, okay.
Makes sense.
But probably the most critical edit was gutting the Indy-Marion romance, really dialing that back.
Tell us more about that, because their relationship feels pretty central, but you're saying it was reframed quite a bit.
Yeah, the sources suggest that in the earlier drafts, it was much steamier, more like a typical fling or affair. Again, sort of pulling on that old Bond trope.
Yeah. They deliberately changed it from that steamy affair vibe to the snappy banter that we actually love.
Why that change?
Well, the banter implies history, doesn't it? A deep, complicated past, shared pain, maybe? But it avoids making him seem like just another womanizer, which would have felt wrong for this version of the hero.
Right. It keeps him sympathetic, like he's loyal in his own complicated way to this one woman, not just playing the field.
Exactly. Relatable.
And the costume bits, they became more than just looks, too. They got written in as functional.
Precisely. The fedora, it became mandatory. The script actually describes it shielding Indy's eyes in sandstorms.
Practical.
And the whip, it got upgraded from just a cool prop to being this crucial plot saver, the thing that gets him out of impossible spots.
And Harrison Ford had to learn to use it properly.
Oh, yeah. Ford came in after Tom Selleck couldn't do it, schedule a conflict with Magnum PI. Ford spent months training to crack that whip convincingly, really embedding it physically into who Indy was.
It's interesting, though, that snake fear. While they came up with it at the conference, the sources say it wasn't fully baked into that very first Kasdan draft. It got solidified later.
Yeah, it fully solidified in later revisions. By the time they actually locked the script, December 1979, the final characterization was this really interesting blend.
A blend of what?
Well, he wasn't just a treasure hunter anymore. He was finalized as this flawed professor with a code. He's fearless for the greater good, despite having this intense personal fear of snakes.
So, like a moral compass, but still rough around the edges.
Kind of like he had the moral backbone and loyalty of a hero from Seven Samurai, but mixed with the sort of rough and tumble cynicism of a Western anti-hero from, say, The Magnificent Seven.
That complexity, that's what grounds the absolutely massive scale of the production that followed, right? I mean, 6,000 storyboards?
Incredible number.
A budget that ballooned up to $20 million, which was huge then. And the sheer logistics of getting over 3,000 real snakes for that pit scene.
Yeah, can you imagine? That grounded hero needed that huge mythological backdrop, and vice versa.
And that blend, high concept myth, huge physical scale, it definitely paid off. Raiders makes, what, $389 million? Launches this massive franchise.
Still going strong, more or less.
But let's bring it back to you listening. What was it about this final version, this flawed professor, that made him so much more iconic than that original Indiana Smith idea ever could have been?
Well, Kasdan himself offered some great insight on this later. Looking back at the rewrites, he said making Indy human, vulnerable, funny, kind of messy, that's what stopped him from just being another untouchable spy figure.
We root for him because he's scared of something silly.
Exactly. If he'd stayed as that slick, chain-smoking, maybe fedora-less Bond Indy hybrid, he probably would have just, flopped. Like some of those less memorable spy movies from that time. He needed the flaws. He needed the grit, the fear, the snappy banter.
He needed that texture, yeah. And we shouldn't forget Harrison Ford's contribution in performance, too. You mentioned the sources confirm Ford improvised maybe half his lines.
Something like that, yeah. He took that foundation of the flawed professor from the script and just injected these moments of real human weariness, of improvisation.
Which gave us some absolute gems, including that classic line when Marion asks about his scars.
Oh, yeah. A perfect comeback. Sums up his whole philosophy, doesn't it? It's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. Ford really used the written vulnerability to create a fully realized, lived-in character on screen.
So wrapping it up, we've seen how this character went through this amazing transformation from basically a James Bond knockoff to this deeply flawed but ultimately heroic academic. And that massive shift really came down to two big things. Raising the stakes with the Ark and making him human by giving him one specific, slightly ridiculous fear. It's actually a pretty powerful lesson in how you build a character, isn't it? If the failure of that slick, perfect Indiana Smith idea proves anything, it's that maybe a vulnerability needs to be a bit ironic, a bit ridiculous to really connect. Makes you wonder, what modern action hero could use that kind of defining contradictory flaw to really elevate them? Yeah. Something for you to think about next time you hear the crack of that whip.